How many times have you reached out and only to find nothing? Not the absence of someone, but that hollow place where hope falls and makes no sound. It is there that the wound opens quietly, asking, how do you trust again when every part of you has learned to shrink? In a village forgotten by calendars, there lived a woman who embroidered silence. Her name was Solon, and each morning she walked to the edge of a stream, where her hands wove invisible threads between stones. They said she was mad, but she whispered, "No, I'm making pacts with the unseen." She spoke little but listened to everything, as if every falling leaf carried a message for someone who had lost the map to their own name. One morning she woke to find a box at her doorstep. Small, wrapped in faded blue cloth. No note. No sender. Light as a long-forgotten promise. Yet Solon knew. It was not a gift. It was a summons. She placed it at the center of her home but did not open it. Left it there between the silence and her breath. And that night she dreamed of a hand withdrawing. She woke to the sound of the wind saying a name she hadn't remembered was hers. And for the first time in many years, she did not walk to the stream. She sat before the box, waiting for it to speak. It didn't. But something inside her began to listen. Not with ears, but with that ancient place that once believed and then went still. Because sometimes, to trust again, you must first hear what was never said. Solon didn't sleep the next night. She sat beside the box until dawn unfolded like a wounded animal returning to the woods. There were no dreams, only a slow echo, her own name pulsing faintly inside her chest, like a bell in a tower without ropes. The world outside kept its rhythm. Children ran. The baker whistled. Someone swept leaves that always came back. But inside Solon's house, time no longer moved. She began writing names on slips of paper. Names that stung. Names that vanished. Names never spoken aloud. Each fold in the paper felt like a quiet attempt to call something back. The box remained silent but not indifferent. Solon began to sense a breath within it. Not a presence demanding, but one waiting. Waiting not to be discovered but remembered. On the third morning, when sunlight touched the window pane, she heard a crack. A single floorboard giving way, as if the house had changed its mind. And in that nearly imperceptible sound, she felt the return of something old. Not fear, not hope, but the memory of a time when trust came easy, unguarded. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. Tears came without sound, watering seeds she never believed would grow again. And for the first time, she spoke aloud. "I remember you." She didn't know who she was speaking to, but the box, somehow, heard her. The following days stretched wide and slow, like dusk refusing to leave. Solon no longer waited for the box to change. She began changing around it. She moved through her home like a pilgrim, touching corners, gathering threads of herself forgotten in drawers and dust. There was no ritual, but everything she did felt sacred. Each gesture said, "I am still here." At night, she would sit across from the box and let herself unravel. Not with grief, but with reverence, as if mourning something she had once buried too quickly. One evening, she whispered a story aloud to no one. It was the story of a girl who had trusted too fast and broken too quietly. And as the story ended, she felt no pity, no bitterness, only the soft ache of recognition. The box remained closed, and yet, something inside her had opened. The box never moved, but Solon's presence beside it had changed. It was no longer a watch, not a test. It had become a kind of tending, like sitting beside someone ill without asking for stories or reasons, just staying. People in the village noticed her absence at the stream. Some knocked, some called her name. She answered only with her eyes, which said, "Not yet." Many believed she had fallen into some kind of sadness, but the few who listened in silence knew she was listening to something they could not hear. One afternoon, she felt the need to clean her entire home, not from dust, but from echoes. Each swept corner was a gesture of farewell to the woman she no longer needed to be. She placed dried flowers under her bed, lit a candle where no altar had ever stood. And before the box, she placed a mirror. Not to see her face, but to remember that some things are only revealed in reflection. Staring into the mirror, she saw not her own image but a distant field, 2 hands holding and a promise once broken that had never been grieved. Solon understood. The box didn't carry answers. It held the pain she had hidden from herself. And trust doesn't return when pain leaves. It returns when you can sit beside it and stay. The next night, the box seemed to breathe deeper, not with sound, but with presence. Silence grew dense around it, like the weight of a memory about to speak. And Solon knew. It wasn't the box that needed to open. It was her. She found an old thread of red wool tucked away in a drawer, kept from a youth she barely remembered. She wrapped the box with it, not to bind it, but to honor it. Then, quietly, she stepped outside. She walked to the old tree at the village edge, the place where once she'd said yes and never returned. She sat at its roots and placed the box on the earth before her, closed her eyes, listened. She listened to leaves, to time, and then to a voice that wasn't a voice, but she knew it belonged to her. Not the broken version, not the doubtful one, but the voice buried beneath them all, waiting to be trusted enough to surface. Then came the whisper from her lips. I don't need to understand. I just need to be here. The box remained closed, but what was inside it entered her. And in that moment, the wind snapped a dry branch, and the falling was gentle. No one came to her door anymore. It was as if the world sensed something sacred inside, something not to be touched with questions or noise. Solon no longer needed the box to speak. What she needed to hear had never been outside her. It was tucked within, where time carves caverns to hold unloved things. She left the box where it was, not out of fear, but out of reverence. It had become an altar of sorts, like a nameless grave that still warms the ground beneath it. Each day she sat before it like someone praying without knowing the god's name. She asked for nothing, expected nothing, but felt everything. And to feel now was a courage she didn't know she possessed. At dusk, her hand would sometimes reach out gently, not to open, but to say, I'm still here. And in that quiet gesture, something softened. Not peace, but a wild tenderness, like an animal deciding to rest its head on your lap. In a twilight without date, she knew the truth. What had left her had never really gone. It was only waiting for her to listen with closed eyes. That night, the box was gone. No crack, no light, just no longer there. And she did not look for it. The next morning, her home felt lighter, as if an old secret had finally risen from every crevice, bowed its head, and left quietly. She didn't search for the box, because she knew now it had never been a box. It had been a mirror without glass, and mirrors do not vanish. They move inward. She sat by the window, sunlight pouring in without demand. Her hands lay open, no longer reaching. Outside, the stream still flowed, but for the first time in years she felt no need to go to it. What she had sought in its waters now moved through her. A child passed her gate that morning, barefoot, wide-eyed, carrying the silence of something broken they couldn't name. Solon opened the door, said nothing, but in her gaze was a sentence she had waited all her life to hear. I believe in you, even if you don't yet believe in yourself. And in that exchange without vows, something ancient realigned. Not with thunder, not with light, but with a quietness that only broken hearts recognize as true. Trust didn't return like lightning. It returned like the scent of bread rising in the oven, like the sound of rain before it touches earth, like the warmth of a hand never asking to be held back. An empty chair on the porch, a new room in the chest, and the whisper for when all feels too far to reach. You don't need to know to trust. You need to trust to know. If you wish to walk further down this hidden path, return here with empty hands, closed eyes, and listen to what was never said.